Well, hello and welcome once again to another edition of Pray on This. I'm your host, John Pray. Before we get going, hit that like button, subscribe, and turn on notifications. As we all know, Bill C-11 is here, and I've already noticed a change to my algorithm on some of my social media. Seems that Justin is already at work. So, today I'm going to start off by talking about the ever going on ever more revealing Chinese election interference. And I'm going to talk about MP Michael Chong. Michael Chong is a Conservative Party of Canada MP who in the 2021 election was targeted by the Chinese Communist Party to lose his seat. And it was done so by threatening his family over votes that he had made in the House of Commons, condemning the CCP treatment of the Uyghurs as a genocide. Now, this has really exploded in Parliament the last couple of days, and the Prime Minister has been questioned hard. Now, on Monday, he tried to answer questions, which he did a horrible job of doing. And then yesterday, he never answered a single question. His public safety minister, the always disingenuous, always lying Marco Mendicino, stood up and answered a few. His hatchet man, his government house leader, Mark Holland, who Dan Mateague, who was his mentor, is now ashamed to admit that he even knows who Mark Holland is, stood up and lies came flying out of his mouth. The Deputy Prime Minister, Krista Freeland, tried to brush it off, claiming that, as a Ukrainian Canadian, I know what it's like to be targeted by a communist regime. I'm sure you do, Krista, considering that you and I are the same age, and that the Soviet Union fell in 1991 when both you and I were 22 years old. What were you, a college student? Come on, you weren't targeted. I mean, the fact of the matter is that the liberals are sloughing this off. And what it really comes down to is this is just more evidence that the Chinese Communist Party was trying to influence our elections. They were trying to help Justin Trudeau and the liberals get elected through donations to the Trudeau Foundation, through indirect donations from Canadian citizens or Chinese Canadians, making donations to his Papineau riding, and by targeting Conservative Party MPs or candidates with misinformation campaigns and also threatening their families who were back in China so that they would lose the elections and liberals would win. Justin knew about it. He's known about it probably since prior to the 2019 election. The more details that come out, the more that we see that the Chinese Communist Party had their fingers all over the Liberal Party of Canada. Yesterday, it got to the point that when the Conservative Party House leader and former leader Andrew Scheer stood up and asked the House for an emergency debate on this issue. House Speaker Anthony Rota, who is the MP for Nipissing and is a liberal, shut it down. Didn't want to hear about it. And then when there was a lot of commotion amongst the benches, as there normally is when there's a controversial ruling from the speaker, he asked, does the leader of the opposition wish to speak to the chair? Pierre Poilievre said yes, stood up, started to speak to the chair. He was invited to. And then Rhoda promptly threatened to kick him out of the House for the rest of the day. This just goes to show just how deep the corruption within the Liberal Party is, that they're even trying to use their party member Speaker of the House, who is supposed to be independent, who, upon his election or her election, takes an oath that they will be an independent arbitrator of discussion in the House and that they will not rule in favor of one party or the other, definitely ruled with his party and along party lines. Just how far in does this liberal corruption go? Well, it's starting to show. If we take a look at recent reports, the Conservative Party of Canada out fundraised all other parties in the first quarter of 2023. They have raised over $5 million to fight the next election just in the first 3 months of this year. They are more than double the Liberals. They are more than 3 times the New Democratic Party. And there's no sense even talking about what the Green Party gets. I think we're already seeing the end is here. It's even extended now into the Prime Minister's office with his Director of Communications leaving in June. There are other members of the PMO office who will also be leaving in June. Now, one of them is leaving to set up the next election, but honestly, that's a really tough and thankless job. It will be interesting to see what happens at what they're calling Liberal 2023, the Liberals' annual policy convention, which starts tomorrow, May the 4th, in Ottawa, and continues through the 5th and the 6th. The reason I say it will be interesting is that Justin Trudeau will be speaking, and we will see what his true intentions are, because he's going to be pressed as to whether or not he's leading the Liberals into the next election. I also find it to be amazing because the keynote speaker, and it's not just one, it's basically a keynote fireside chat of Chrystia Freeland speaking with Hillary Clinton. It's kind of a joke. The Liberal Party of Canada is constantly accusing the Conservatives of bringing US-style politics to Canada, yet we haven't had mass shootings in Canada. We've had one, the mass casualty event in Nova Scotia, and my heart does go out to the victims of that event. That was 3 years ago. The United States has had God knows how many in that time. But if you take a look, all the laws, anything that's controversial in the United States, the Liberals bring it here. And now they're even bringing a darling of the Democratic Party, the far left Hillary Rodham Clinton, to speak at Liberal 2023. It's very obvious that the wheels are off in Ottawa. They're directionalist. They're directionless. They have no real vision for the country that's facing probably the largest crises that we've faced in almost half a century. We have runaway inflation, massive cost of living crisis, a housing bubble which is so big and it could burst at any moment in time that would make the 2008 financial crisis look like a picnic. Inflation is a government-driven problem. I took economics in school, part of my business degree, and the definition of economics is when the government inflates the money supply, which is what the Liberal Party of Canada have done. Everything that we're experiencing in this country right now is the current Liberal government's fault. And the more that Liberals take to Twitter and other social media and say, oh, well, I agree it's time for a change in government, but not this Conservative Party that could form government. It's better to stick with what we know. Shows actually just how desperate they are. All I can say is that I hope the election comes very soon and that Canada is saved from these destructive policies. That, as always, is Prey on This.